when a pilot with bazookas led a tank battle. Captain Marcus Reeve was never meant to be on the ground. A top-tier fighter pilot with over 150 flight missions logged, he was the kind of soldier who felt more at home slicing through the clouds than trudging through mud. But fate, unforgiving and cruel, had other plans. It started with a flash in the sky, a direct hit from a surface-to-air missile. Marcus ejected at the last possible moment, the explosion from his downed jet searing the heavens like a dying star. He landed in the middle of hostile territory, somewhere in the ruins of Aldamas province, his parachute tangled in the skeleton of a dead tree. Disoriented but alive, he had only what remained from the cockpit: a sidearm, 2 anti-tank bazookas stored for emergency ground support, and a cracked radio that spat nothing but static. His breathing was shallow, heart pounding like enemy artillery. Behind him, the thunder of tanks shook the ground. That's when he saw them, 3 enemy T-90 tanks, moving like metal beasts across the wasteland. But what chilled Marcus wasn't just the tanks. It was the screaming. Over a ridge, less than a mile ahead, a small squad of Allied engineers was pinned down. They weren't soldiers, just mechanics and technicians caught in the wrong place. He could have hidden, waited for extraction, assuming it ever came. But something deep within him snapped, the same instinct that made him a fighter pilot in the first place. He wasn't going to let those people die. Marcus crawled over a ridge, surveying the battlefield with a pilot's precision. The engineers were cornered in a bombed-out depot, low on ammo, surrounded by metal death. And then he saw them. 2 abandoned Abrams tanks, disabled but not destroyed. They were parked under a collapsed hangar, the last survivors of a failed retreat. One had its turret partially blown off, but the other looked reparable. Marcus ran like hell, bazookas slung over his back, boots slicing into the gravel. He reached the first tank, pried open the hatch, and climbed in. Inside, the smell of smoke and blood hit him. The crew was gone. Only their ghosts remained. But the systems flickered. She still had a pulse. With shaking hands, Marcus did what no pilot should have ever been trained to do. He activated a tank. Engineering manuals from training flashed in his memory, and he improvised the rest. Outside, the T-90s were closing in. Marcus whispered, "Let's dance." The first bazooka shot was pure instinct. He fired from the hatch while the tank systems initialized. The rocket soared and struck the side of the lead T-90. Not a kill, but a maiming shot. Enough to confuse them. Then the tank roared to life. He gripped the controls. Compared to a fighter jet, it was like driving a drunk elephant. But Marcus adapted fast. He wasn't just surviving, he was hunting. For the engineers, it was like watching a myth come alive. Out of nowhere, a lone tank bolted into view, bazooka fire blazing, turrets swinging like an angry god. They had no idea who was inside. Only that someone had come to save them. Marcus took out the first tank by luring it between the depot's reinforced walls, then blasting it at point-blank range. The explosion knocked him sideways in his seat, ears ringing, eyes burning from smoke. His tank was hurt, but not dead. He emerged from the hatch again, this time wielding the second bazooka. The second enemy tank spotted him, fired. The shot landed just meters away, launching him off the tank and into a ditch. His world spun into darkness. When Marcus awoke, it was night. He couldn't hear from his right ear, and his arm was broken. But the engineers had found him, dragged him back to the depot, patched him up. "You saved us," one whispered. "I was just trying to land," Marcus muttered. But they weren't safe yet. The third tank remained. The engineers were ready to flee, but Marcus had one last idea. He pointed at the second disabled Abrams. "Can you fix that one?" The head mechanic, a grizzled woman named Elena, looked at him like he was mad. "It needs a miracle." Marcus smiled. "Then you'd better believe in one." By dawn, they had it barely operational. The turret still worked. The engine groaned like a dying whale, but it could move. Marcus, now bandaged and strapped to the command seat, prepared for a final showdown. The third T-90 approached, alone now, cautious. He baited it. Let it see the smoke trail. Led it into the ruined depot, past wreckage and shadow. And then he lit the trap. He had placed one of the engineer's homemade fuel bombs inside the first wrecked Abrams. As the enemy tank drew closer, Marcus triggered it remotely. The explosion was volcanic. The shockwave rocked the valley, and the enemy tank was lifted off its tracks, tossed like a toy. Marcus limped out of the second Abrams as the enemy commander stumbled from his hatch, stunned, alive. They locked eyes. Both exhausted. Both warriors. The commander reached for his sidearm. But Marcus was faster. One shot. One clean kill. It was over. When the rescue chopper arrived 3 hours later, they found Marcus collapsed next to the burnt husk of the tank, his broken arm tied to his chest with a fuel hose, and a grin that said he'd just cheated death again. Back at base, no one believed it at first. A fighter pilot leading a tank battle? Armed only with bazookas and guts? But the engineers knew, and they told the story. Captain Marcus Reeve became a legend, the Sky Devil who drove a tank. And somewhere deep in classified files, under a redacted folder marked Operation Backfire, sits the only official report. Enemy destroyed. Civilians saved. Pilot-led ground assault confirmed. Recommend citation for valor and psychological evaluation. Marcus never flew again. But sometimes, when the wind howled like engines and the night was still, he could almost feel the rumble of treads beneath him. Would you like me to adapt this into a short screenplay, or turn it into an illustrated story?